What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another great episode of the Tightlines Podcast. In this week's episode, we are going to discuss 10 topics in relation to the spring bass pre-spawn period. These are, as usual, randomly elected with no preparation beforehand. So, there's the only knowledge I've got for these is what I've got in my head, right? I haven't written anything down. These topics, I'm telling you what I know off the top of my head. We're going to talk as in-depth as possible with each one. So go ahead and strap in for another great episode of the Tightlines Podcast.
Welcome to the Tightlines Podcast, your destination for anything fishing. Now here's your host, Tyler Plackey.
Alrighty, welcome back from the introduction, and we're going to jump right into it. Nothing crazy. So number one, how water temperature triggers the pre-spawn bass movement. So pre-spawn, for those of you that don't know, is that time before, spawn period, hence pre-spawn. Spawn period is when a male bass and a female bass make, baby bass, and then those are the fish we catch, right? So how water temperature triggers the pre-spawn bass movement. So as we come out of winter, ice comes off all of our waters, the sun starts to warm up, we get into spring, right? So as everything starts to warm up, so does the water. As water warms, bass get that sense of, oh, it's warming up. It is time for me to start getting ready for spawn period. I know spawn comes in the spring, and I need to get ready for it. So water temperature tells them, okay, it's getting to that time of year. Water's getting warm and staying there. It's not getting back real cold again. It's not getting iced over again. That means I need to be ready to mate, which means they're going to start eating. So water temperature triggers pre-spawn bass movement because it warms up, tells fish, hey, it's getting that time of the year. It's getting ready to be time to spawn. I need to eat. I need to be ready for it. That is how water temperature triggers it. Number two, the best structure to target during the pre-spawn. Some options are like secondary point, staging areas, channel swings, etc. I'm looking for any sort of transition area on the body of water. In the winter, obviously, bass go down typically into the deeper holes. That's where they can stay warm. They kind of hang out. In the summer, they're sitting up real shallow typically. So in that spring, in that pre-spawn period, bass are starting to transition up. So I'm looking for any sort of inclines, changes in elevation where, it's becoming a little bit more shallow. Looking for areas that fish might be getting ready to start bedding. So areas like gravel and rock piles. Looking for anything that I can find, but really just looking for where the fish are. I don't specifically target any actual structures. Obviously, if you see a stick in the water, probably be a fish nearby. If you see a dock, there's going to be fish nearby it. But overall, I'm just kind of going around, and at this point in time, I am, typically throwing something like a spinner bait, just kind of anything I can go out, some sort of search bait to find where the fish are, and I'm learning from that, okay? So I threw it out, I'm fishing across, the fish bit in this area. Well, what do I know about the bottom in that area? It's a little muddy, it's about yay deep compared to the rest of the pond, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of where I'm coming up with it. Fish don't always stage on the same spot, even within the same body of water, but especially across different bodies of water. They're not always going to be in the same area. You can't just say, hey, the fish is going to be 14 foot off the bank today. Tomorrow they'll be 13. You can't say that because fish are living, breathing creatures. They make decisions. They do different things. There's always some sort of other, factor that comes into play where you just got to go find where the fish are. Again, for me, I do it typically with a search bait. You can run out forward-facing sonar if you have, down imaging, side imaging, Mega Live 3, whatever you've got, right? If you have 360. But however you can go out and you can find your fish, you got to find where they're at. Obviously, they're not going to be in all their super deep holes. They're not going to be sitting right up on the bank. They're going to be somewhere in the middle. So kind of think about that as you're going around and finding your fish. Number three is forage transitions during the pre-spawn. At this point, it's less I think about what they're eating, specifically what the forage is compared to how the forage is presented. So in the winter, obviously you're looking for they're very slow. Winter baits are stuff like, blade baits and jerk baits and slow dragging and jigs, stuff like that. Ned rigs, very finesse, very petite, very slow. That's what typically you fish in the winter. In the spring, obviously, bass know they're, this time in the pre-spawn, they are fattening up. This is a great time to catch PB because bass are getting huge. And so you need to go out, you need to throw stuff that's going to attract fish. Well, duh. but I'm going to talk about a couple of those. So I think typically they're going to go quicker. They want a little bit of movement, a little bit of flash. So they're typically looking at something like bait fish rather than craws. Looking at, if it's bluegill, if it's shad, if it's herring, if it's perch, whatever it might be. But I'm throwing stuff like spinner baits, throwing stuff like crankbaits, rattle traps. Those have done me real well. Flukes are pretty good here. It just depends on what your body of water is, the stain of it right now. I know around us the water's really stained. We've had a ton of flooding recently. Our water, all of our ponds and rivers have been blown out like crazy. So just kind of figuring out what works in your body of water. Haven't had a ton of luck on the chatterbait around here in this time period. Typically that's a little too much for them still. I like chatterbait more in the summer personally. Typically fish are going away from, the really slow, obviously because everything's speeding up. So there's typically not a ton of super slow baits or stuff that's moving a little bit more, attract a little bit more of attention. So like again, bluegill, herring, other bass, shad, whatever it might be. Number 4, why big female bass are most vulnerable during the pre-spawn. So during this time, these fish are trying to fatten up. Obviously, they've got to be able to lay the eggs. They got to protect their eggs. They got to be big fish. So they're the most vulnerable now, for us at least, because they're eating everything in sight. This is one of those times, it's just like in the fall transition where they're getting ready to go into winter, where they're just eating anything and everything. So that's when they're the most vulnerable in our sense. They need to eat something. So if they see something that looks like food, they're going to eat it. Right now, it's a great time, we talked about, the fluke. We talked about, the crankbait. We talked about the spinnerbait. Clyde baits are great right now. Bigger swim baits, smaller swim baits, just anything that kind of, presents as bait. But these big female bass are really trying to fatten up. Number 5, these next couple, actually 5, 6, and 7. And 7 almost looks like a repeat of 1, so we may skip that a bit. Sorry. We'll touch on it again. These are all weather related. So number 5, how weather fronts affect pre-spawn bass behavior. As we all know, bass respond to changing weather patterns, specifically pressure systems. So on these really high pressure days, a lot of clouds in the sky, a lot of wind, you're going to be having, a ton of bass movement. So, looking at is, as fronts are coming in, as rain's coming in, that's a great time to be out fishing. Just as stuff's changing, that's all stuff that fires a fish up, makes them think, oh crap, I need to eat. I may not be able to eat for a bit. That's a great time to be out there. Number 6, the role of wind in locating active pre-spawn bass. Typically for me, if I'm on a body of water, I'm going to the wind-blown side. Specifically if I get into like a corner, if there's a corner that's more wind-blown than the other. That's because if you think about it, the bass eat crawdads, they eat other small fish, but all those bait fish eat something too, and typically it's stuff like phytoplankton and other really small, fries that are out there. So everything's got to eat something. And the wind is going to be blowing all of that real tiny bait over the wind-blown side. So if it's a west to east wind, you go fish that east side, that's where the wind's coming across. Because think about this again, if that's where the phytoplankton are, that's where the bluegill is going to be. If that's where the bluegill is going to be, that's where the bass is going to be, right? A bass isn't going to sit on one side with the bluegill on the other and think, I wonder where food's at. No, they're going to follow the bait, and that's where they're going to eat. So definitely going on to that windy side. Also use wind to your advantage. You throwing stuff like a spinnerbait, how that wind can help shimmer a little bit. It can help pass the light around a bit from the flash. Definitely a great time to be out fishing. Number 7, and again, we're going a little quick here, guys. I hope you guys will be okay with that because it's been really nice here and I'd love to be out fishing. So another nice quick episode for you, but just touch on a couple quick topics. We'll go more in depth next week with some actual bait talk. Number 7 is how warming trends reposition bass within staging areas. Again, as the water gets warmer, fish are coming up. They're getting more and more shallow. Again, in the winter when it's cold, fish are a cold-blooded animal. They're going to sit down real low, as far away from the ice and the cold air as possible. Trying to stay down, if the water's, if the ice up top is 32 degrees, well, down at the bottom where it's not ice, it might be 35 degrees. And that 3 degrees can make a huge difference for a fish. So as it starts to warm, as that sun beats down, obviously the water's going to warm a bit. They're going to move up a bit more. They're going to keep moving up a little bit every day. And they're getting to that transition period where they're setting up, they're getting ready to spawn, getting ready to bed. Finding where the forage is, they're finding where they actually want to bed, they're, kind of making a plan, right? So that's kind of how warming trends help. As it gets warmer, bass are going to move up more shallow. Obviously, when it gets really, really hot, that's when they'll flip around and go back down deep where it's a little bit cooler, so not getting too hot and overheating. But that's more of a summer thing. In the pre-spawn, they're going to move up shallow. Number 8, and this one really targets me because of how I fish. This is bank fishing strategies for pre-spawn bass. So the first thing I'm going to say is when you're bank fishing, have a set plan of what you want to throw that day. So for me, I'm going to have a couple types of search baits. So for me, that is anywhere from, a rattle trap to, a spinner bait. Might be a chatterbait for you if you like to throw a chatterbait at this time. I don't throw the chatterbait much in this time period, as we talked about. You might, and that's totally okay. But find something that you can chuck and wind, you can move around, getting into a bunch of different spots, and that's your search, but you're searching for your fish. You're trying to find that first bite. Okay, that's where the fish are. From there, that's when you can go into more of like flukes, and you can still throw your Ned rigs, you can throw your blade baits, throw your square bills or your circuit board crankbaits. But kind of finding, first thing is find where the fish are, then you target the fish, and that's when you can change your colors and your line, your depth, all that fun stuff, your sizes. But first thing you gotta do is find. After that, another big key is making sure that you're kind of staying out of sight of the fish. Obviously, fish can see, if you can see the fish, they can see you out of water. You want to make sure that you're not spooking the fish when you show up, because again, once you spook a fish, that fish isn't going to bite anymore. They're done for the day. Another one for me is going to be make sure that that you're hitting all of these, finding where there's spots for fish to hide. You're hitting all the different parts. So again, we go back to the windblown side. Go on the windblown side, find where there's something in the water that a fish might relate to, whether it's, a stick, whether it's a dock, if it's a tree, if it's a pile of grass, in ponds around here, if it's, a pile of garbage that they might sit near because it makes them feel safe. But kind of find where the fish hang out, work it, really be thorough, especially if you're fishing ponds. You've got a ton of time, really be thorough, hit all the different spots. Don't waste too much time in one spot, but at the same time, make sure you're not just, throwing one cast saying, oh, no fish here. So there's my couple bank fishing strategies. The biggest one is just have patience. This is one of those times of the year where fish are real finicky. Obviously, they're looking for everything to eat, but they may not be where you think they're at. With weather changing, with temperatures changing, water temps go up and down. These fish might move up and down a bit. Again, that's why they're on that, kind of transition period, because on a very nice day, they're going to move up nice and shallow. But hey, it gets cold for a few days because it's March, and for me, I'm in Indiana. Well, they're going to dip back down a bit deeper. So just kind of adjust, be patient, know where know that these fish aren't always in the same exact spot. And just be ready to spend some time out there and find these fish. This is definitely, this isn't the fall time where they're just eating everything. All you have to do is throw it out there and they'll bite it. There's still a bit of thinking and some like tactical ideas here that you have to put through to make sure that you can find these fish and catch them. Number 9, how water clarity changes lure selection in the pre-spawn. For me, it's very dark around here. Our waters are very muddy, at least right now. Ton of rain, ton of flooding has blown our waters out. Not very good water clarity compared to what the water sources normally are. So for me, I'm throwing stuff that's got a little bit of a thump, gonna have a little bit of drawing power. So I'm looking at glide baits right now. I've been throwing some glide baits. I am looking at the spinnerbait, obviously. When I'm going spinnerbait, I like 1 silver, 1 gold. Kind of gives a little bit of a shine of both. Really attract the fish. Put a nice, trailer on there. There's times how fish spinnerbaits without a trailer. This is not one of those times right now. I want the thump with the paddle tail. Also, I'm throwing kind of flat-sided crankbaits, so something like the Fritz side. Something like the OG Tiny 4, the OG Slim 6, stuff like that's really good. And, a little bit tighter wobble pattern definitely makes a difference at this time. Also looking at rattle traps. Like I said, ton of stuff that's pretty simple. I like darker colors when it's stained. I feel like, there's, rather than seeing the actual color, it's just more standing out. So if it's really stained kind of greenish water, like when I was down in South Carolina, I'm throwing black and blue, I'm throwing black and red, I'm throwing my dark colors, so they, more or less just see the profile rather than actually seeing, oh, there's a little bit of chartreuse on the bottom and purple on the top. In the winter when it's crystal clear, we're throwing certain colors of jerk baits and Ned rigs and blade baits to, attract the fish that are going to sit there and look at it for 45 seconds. Well, these fish right now, if they have a chance at a bait, they're going to go eat it. So you got to make sure that, you're getting a bait that it can be seen. Number 10, the last one we've got is common mistakes anglers make during the pre-spawn period. Number 1, my first big mistake I think people make is people get so amped up for top water. I don't think this is top water time personally. I'm not throwing top water right now. Not even a thought. The only way I could see top water coming into play is if you're in like a shallow creek, if you're knee deep, you're ankle deep, where there's not much space between the ground and the top. And you can go out, you can throw a little popper or a small whopper plopper where that bait isn't 8 feet above the fish's head, it's 3 inches. Well, this time, if a bait's 3 inches above the fish's head, guess what the fish is going to do? It's going to eat it, right? Obviously in the winter, if you're in a pond that's 15 foot deep, you're not throwing a frog out over top, because guess what? A fish isn't going to exert the energy to shoot up off the bottom and hit that frog in the winter. So first big mistake, obviously, is stuff like throwing top water. Another big one is trying to power fish too much. Not throwing humongous swim jigs, not throwing big chatterbaits. I'm still throwing a little finesse here. Remember, these fish are still in cold water. They're still just a tad timid, as much as they're still trying to get food. They're not going to branch off, to something they see 40 feet away. They're still looking for stuff that's nearby. While they're opportunistic, they're not going to be stupid and burn energy on things that they're not going to be able to get to. So I'm throwing stuff again as we talk. Spinner baits are great. A little ball of shad, swim right by a fish. That fish is going to jump on it. Glide baits, that's a nice big easy meal for them. Glide baits are great. Definitely a good time to be throwing those. Just not trying to overfish it. Obviously, like I said, we're not throwing swim jigs, not throwing huge heavy football jigs, not throwing big chatterbaits, not throwing, humongous swim baits. It's kind of funny. It's one of those you just gotta figure out what works for you. Another common mistake is just not giving it enough time. That's one of those where, again, you got to put the time and the work in. Fishing doesn't come easy to everybody. There's some people that for some reason can go out and they can cast 10 times and catch 8 fish and be done for the day and they're happy. I'm not one of those people. I got to go out and there's times I have to cast 300 times and I still don't even get a nibble. I spent last weekend up fishing in northern Indiana, and we went out and fished for 14 hours and didn't get nibbled on once. So there's 28 fishing hours put in, not a single bite, not a nibble, nothing. That's just kind of part of it. So make sure, you're putting in your time, you're really thinking, you might be changing your colors a bit, change your cadences, your depths. There's all sorts of things, because again, these fish are in different areas. If it's warmer, they might be up more shallow. If it's a bit colder out, they might be a little bit deeper. So just making sure that you're really, truly working the body of water. All right, everybody, that is this week's episode for you. That is episode 40 of the Tight Lines podcast. That is crazy to me. We're already 40 episodes in. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the podcast so far. And if you are, please be sure to drop a subscription to the show. Also drop us a positive review, as that helps the algorithm and gets the show out, promotes the show. And if you're not subscribed to us, we are on YouTube, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. Super easy to find. It's Tight Lines Podcast. It has the same logo on all 5. Go and check us out again. Drop us a good review, whether it's a 5-star review, a written review, a thumb up, a thumb down, hopefully not a thumb down, because that really does help us out. Also, go ahead and check out my YouTube if you're not already listening on YouTube. It is Tyler Plackey Fishing, super easy to find. Out there, I've got some really cool videos. You guys can kind of see what I've been up to. Got some cool stuff coming out with, pre-spawn fishing, throwing some spinnerbaits, some really cool stuff. Hopefully, you guys will enjoy that. Also, check out my Instagram and my TikTok. Both of them are still Tyler Plackey Fishing. Especially check out the Instagram. That one is by far the most up-to-date. That's the first place you're going to find anything and everything I'm doing, whether it's fishing trips, it's, bait stuff, all sorts of cool things. That's going on my Instagram first. Again, there you can kind of keep up with what I'm doing, what's going on. You can talk to me. We can talk fishing. You can submit questions for the mailbag. Really anything you want to do, go ahead and check out my Instagram. So thank you guys again so much for listening every week, putting in the time, the dedication. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys are enjoying these episodes. They're a ton of fun to put together, get to try different stuff every week, see what you guys like, what you don't like. Your guys' support really does mean everything to me, that you guys are the whole reason I do the show. If I wasn't getting the support, if you guys didn't enjoy it, obviously I wouldn't be doing the show. And I'm still doing it, so that means you guys must at least somewhat like it. So I'll take that. So thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, Tight Lines, y'all.